Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me this afternoon. 5 years ago, I founded an organization called Entrepreneur First, and we work with very, very early stage entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to share a little bit of the advice that we give to the founders that come and work with us, and some of the traits that we look for that might help you if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. But first, I just wanted to put it into perspective, so to put entrepreneurship into perspective. I don't think if you're here today, this will be a surprise. Technology is changing everything. And if you speak to your parents, technology will have changed their lives. It will have changed the way that they communicate with people through email. It will have changed the way that they buy things through e-commerce. It will have changed the way they might have met their lovers through online dating. But for your generation, what's really, really exciting is that technology is changing far more fundamental things. It's changing how we perceive intelligence through artificial intelligence. It's changing how we think about which planets we live on. It's changing how we think about entertainment through VR and things like Twitch. It's changing some of the fundamental tenets of what it means to be a human. I think one of the things that it's changing significantly, that isn't really talked about very much, is that it's changing careers. The careers that are available to you now, and if you're going through school or if you're thinking about university, the careers that will be available to you by the time that you graduate or leave school will be very, very different to the kind of careers that your parents, your teachers, that your career counselors would have gone through. This is a massive opportunity. It's scary because it means that the future, to some extent, is uncertain, but it also means that there are careers available to you that 10 years ago would have been out of reach. My belief is that the career path for the world's most ambitious has changed. It's now no longer about banking or consulting or law or working for a tech giant. The career for the most ambitious people is building their own startup, is generating new innovation, generating new products through building and founding their own company. Now, you may be listening to this and thinking, but yes, you need to have a network, you need to have tons of cash, you need to have tons of credibility to be able to do this. But to be a founder is one of the few careers where there is no entry test, there is no entry exam, and there's no reason why, as a 12, 15, 18-year-old, you can't get started right away. Over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to work with some really interesting people, and I wanted to share 5 of their stories and a little bit about the message that you can take away as you think about your own journey as potentially being a founder. The first thing that I wanted to dwell on was that we've got to the stage where skills outweigh experience. So 10 years ago, if you were thinking about founding a startup, whether it was a technology startup or a bricks and mortar startup, you would have needed lots and lots of cash. You would have needed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds to get off the ground and get going. The changes in technology mean that we can now produce companies for basically the cost of your time, particularly if you have technical skills. So if you are studying coding, learning how to code, if you're studying computer science, it means that you're developing the skills that will allow you to produce products at very, very low cost, just basically the cost of your time. And what's more, those skills that you develop can give you credibility, give you great credibility, even though you don't have years and years of experience. This is Alec. Alec was part of our 3rd cohort. And Alec decided not to go to university. Alec decided when he was about 8 that the only thing he cared about was coding and really understanding low-level programming. How do you make software work? And he basically spent, from the age of 8 to the age of 19, working on that obsession and building his skills so that he could become a highly skilled, effective, and efficient developer. When Alec joined us, he'd just turned 21, and he hadn't been to university. And what's interesting is he co-founded with someone who had a PhD and who was 12 years older than him. But because his skills were so deep and so strong, he had the credibility to co-found with someone who technically had way more experience than he did. Their company is now absolutely motoring and has a large team of people who are often a lot older and more experienced than Alec is. But age didn't matter. His skills gave him the credibility that he needed. When you think about school and careers and the way that, that your life path is set up for you at the moment, it's often set up in a way to reduce risk, to minimize the amount of risk. Make sure that you get into a good university, make sure that you get the right job, make sure you can stay in that job for years and years and years. But by avoiding risk, you often avoid opportunities. And if we assume that we don't know what the career of the future looks like, now is the time to embrace risk and to experiment. Emily, who's in the middle here, took a number of really interesting risks. So Emily, when she left university, got a place to do physics at Oxford. And she started and realized that she didn't want to do physics at Oxford. What she really wanted to do was to understand how products were built. She wanted to learn how to design products. So she took a risk, she quit Oxford, and she went and learned about product design instead. And then, instead of saying, OK, well, now I should go and work in a product design agency, she said, I've just spent the last year of my degree working on a project. And actually, why don't I take the risk? Why don't I see if I can turn this project into a startup? The project was Blaze, which is a product for cyclists. It's a laser bike light that attaches to the front of your bike and projects an image of a cyclist about 2 meters in front. And it reduces casualties from big trucks and lorries. Her product is now on every single one of the Santander bikes that you see around London. So this company's grown very, very quickly, and that's based on the risks that she took. Take on the impossible. And I think one of the benefits that you have in your youth is that you have naive optimism. You don't know what is and what isn't possible. And yes, people may try to tell you what is and isn't possible, but that doesn't mean you can't try. This is Rob and Zihan, and they were two Imperial grads. Rob from electronics and electronic engineering, and Zihan from a medical imaging PhD. They wanted to take on a really, really hard problem. They wanted to help computers, machines, to imagine images. A really hard problem. And when we were trying to get these guys funded, we're trying to get investors excited about them, typically the response was, well, they've got a demo, but I just don't believe that they can do this. I don't believe that they can do this. It's not possible. Anyway, fast forward 18 months, they have a product where it is possible, and they were acquired by Twitter for a reported $150 million just 18 months after they started. Rob has just turned 26. So even though he had only been out of university for about 18 months, 2 years, he was able to produce a product that people said wasn't possible. And not only that, be able to create a huge amount of value, not only for Twitter, but more generally by creating a piece of innovation that's useful as a product. This is Jenny. Jenny had a problem that she really, really cared about. And I bet that many of you sat here have problems that you really care about and that you think about a lot. And it might be hobbies, or it might be problems that you see in your communities, or it might be problems that you see within your school. But having something that you care about and knowing what you care about and using that as a stimulus to come up with ideas is a fantastic way to get into entrepreneurship. So Jenny really cared about diversity. And she cared about trying to get more women into technology. And she read a really interesting paper. She read a paper that said, if you removed the name of someone from a CV, something that simple, you removed the name, it reduced gender bias, it reduced racial bias, and you were much more likely to get a fairer outcome. She said, she could have said, that's an interesting paper, fantastic. But instead she said, OK, what could we do to make sure that this insight gets to as many people as possible? Jenny had taught herself to code when she was 11. She'd actually set up her own web development agency where she had to say that it was a family business because nobody would trust an 11-year-old girl with their website. But she'd learned the skills that she needed to be able to build products. And she knew how to teach herself about how to build new products. The product she decided to build was a plugin for LinkedIn called unbiased.io. And what it does is it, on LinkedIn, removes the photo and the name so that recruiters, instead of being biased by people's names or by people's pictures, suddenly are able to make a much more unbiased decision. And the final piece is about growth mindset. And I think growth mindset is something that's now taught in schools quite frequently. Who's heard about growth mindset or? Excellent. So when I started reading about growth mindset, I thought, they're talking about entrepreneurs. They're talking about the best entrepreneurs. And for those of you who don't know, growth mindset is this idea that you can change your skills and your ability. So often people have a fixed mindset about certain things, such as I'm bad at maths, or I won't be able to code, or I'm bad at sport. Whereas people with a growth mindset know that at the moment they may not have those abilities, but that doesn't mean that in the future they can't change that. This is really, really important for entrepreneurs. The reason why it's really important is that as an entrepreneur, every couple of months you will need to learn a new skill. And it's not necessarily always the skills that you're good at. For example, you'll have to learn how to build the product, how to hire people, how to find customers, how to sell the product, how to raise investment, how to expand, how to go international. Being a founder is the steepest ever learning curve that you can go through. And I think that's why it attracts really bright, ambitious people who just want to learn and learn and learn. Joe, I think, is a fantastic example of an entrepreneur with a growth mindset. When Joe joined us, he had just finished his computer science masters. And he was pretty quiet. And he was not interested in learning how to sell. He didn't really think that he could sell. But he then realized he had to. He had a pretty good idea. His co-founder was helping him build it. But he knew that of the two co-founders, he was the one that was going to have to learn how to sell. So what did he do? He read pretty much everything on sales. He hounded anyone he knew who had sales ability and tried to get some training from them. And then he put it into action. And my favorite story about Joe is he knew that there was one publisher that had shown interest in the past for a product like his. And so he cold emailed, no response. So what did he do? He went down to their offices. He knew what the guy looked like, knew what the CTO looked like from LinkedIn. And he waited. And every day for a week, he waited outside the office until he could grab the CTO. Grabbed the CTO, made him go for a drink. And a couple of drinks later, Joe's product was being used by this major publishing house. And within a couple of months, they had 40 million people going through the product. This was only because Joe believed that he could learn how to sell and then took it upon himself to make that happen. The career of tomorrow is entrepreneurship. For the most ambitious, the most talented individuals, this is how you can make the biggest impact on the world. It's not through traditional or current career paths. It's through founding your own company, creating your own products. If this is something that you're excited about, think about those 5 individuals that I talked about, and think about how you can replicate what they've done. But even better, instead of replicating, think about how you can make it your own. Entrepreneurship isn't about copying, it's about creating. So I hope that some of you will leave today and immediately get started, regardless of how old you are or regardless of how much experience you have. Thank you very much.